of your grief, but you'll always follow the voices beneath. Guileless son, your spirit will hate her, the flower who married my brother, the traitor, and you will expose his puppet behavior, for you are the proof of how we betrayed her loyalty. Hush, child, the darkness will rise from the deep and carry you down to sleep. Child, the darkness will rise from the deep and carry you down to sleep. Guileless son, each day you grow older, each moment I'm watching my vengeance unfold. For the child of my body, the flesh of my soul will die in returning the birthright he stole. The darkness will rise from the deep and carry you down to sleep. Child, the darkness will rise from the deep and carry you down to
Hello guys, today we will start off with some Timeline Chapter 4, take a look at that, and then on to Mordhau for our first adventure here in a little bit, and then we'll see about some Good Hunt tonight, and go from there. Looking good, may have to head out here in a few minutes, so let's just do at least a little bit of the Chapter 4 we left off on last time reading Timeline, the start of the week on Monday, I believe it was, very fun for that, so let's pick it up with some of that. Good times, and welcome on into a great time. One of the greatest places to be, greatest streams on Twitch TV. Alright, let's check it out then. We have some Timeline indeed to enjoy. We have voice mod working anytime, all the time, whenever you want. As well, some good times with voice mod to be used. Whether we have the headphones in or not, any time for voice mod, absolutely. As we have our introductory music here for Timeline, and get ready for that, let's go ahead and take a look at the commands for current champions, make a quick little list of that as well. This will be champion commands. We can make a nice little list of them as well. Gotta be exciting time today. Looking forward to it all. Great. Let's see what we have here for champion commands, and to be added for our own commands for the list of commands. I was trying to figure that out. So we have the current commands right now for all commands. These are just the Nightbot commands in general. You have those, but we will do a new one here specifically for champion benefits. So champions and champion benefits. Let's take a look. As a champion of the Dragon's Roost, you have earned full access to our glorious emotes, suggestions for adventures on Sub Saturday and Sunday, directly supporting one of the best streams on Twitch and full access to fun commands. Alright, introduction there. We are back to Timeline Good Fun. Full access to fun commands, which are so far general commands, which are so far, and then we'll do the list, and we have now, we'll write off the list, we have chat, hype, welcome back, and bye. We have those so far. So that's a bit of the champion information, current commands, which are for the most part only available to captains, but probably now they're a bit more general. So we have a fun variety of that. Fun time there. Okay, so let's test that out, and we'll get to timeline right away. But for exclamation champion, we now have a list of a few of those commands, and yeah, I'll eventually give Nightbot a little sub or something, but for now, let's just spruce that up a little bit with some emotes there, and looking just fine. Alright, so as a champion of the Dragon's Roost, see how this looks like this. That's just a quick little thing before we start off with timeline. And there it is. Alright, that should be pretty good for now. Alright, just for a little display of the current commands general for everyone to use. We have more personal ones for specific people, but that will give at least give a more idea for things can be used more directly. So anyway, getting started in here, let's begin with timeline. We left off somewhere with those tourists clicking their cameras, I believe. Yep, there it is. Alright, he reached for his radio. Yes, we are, Merrick said. We left off right here. Let's pick it up. Very enjoy back on Monday and Sunday. Pick it up right away. Kate Erickson looked down from the ramparts of Larocque Castle into the inner bailey, the broad, grassy center of the castle 20 feet below. The grass was swarming with tourists of a dozen nationalities, all in bright clothes and shorts, cameras clicking in every direction. I also got the playlist together so far to make that easier to update as we go, so we don't have to do it all at the very end of timeline. This being a rather longer novel, figured, yeah, might as well get that playlist together. So we do have that so far. Just look up on Ace the Sly YouTube timeline reading. So that'll all be 4 parts so far. This will be our 5th part already. So very exciting for that. Beneath her, she heard a young girl say, "Another castle. Why do we have to go to all these stupid castles, Mom?" How dare she? The mother said, "Because Daddy is interested." "But they're all the same, Mom." "I know, dear." The father, a short distance away, was standing inside low walls that outlined a former room. And this, he announced to his family, was the Great Hall. Looking down, Kate saw at once that it wasn't. The man was standing inside the remains of the kitchen. It was obvious that the 3 ovens still visible in the wall to the left. Alright, we'll pick it up here in just a moment. I just need a couple quick minutes. So we look at timeline, other great things. We also celebrating about that. 750 streams average this week, so good time of that. Absolutely. Alrighty. We'll be back in just a minute here as we get things together and figure out my schedule for tonight. I have to head out for a little bit. We'll come back for full main show tonight, but we'll see. Gotta be great in any case. Looking forward to it, guys. Gonna be lovely, you know it. Alright, see you in just a minute. We pick it up timeline right where we were. Gonna be great. Alrighty, we are looking fine. Just great. Let's pick it up with some more timeline. If you guys would like to see the text or in live scene anytime, just let me know. And voice mod will continue to demonstrate here and there, but I believe everything is just great for right now. Okay. Alright. The man was standing inside the remains of the kitchen. It was obvious from the 3 ovens still visible in the wall to the left, and the stone sluice that had brought water could be seen just behind the man as he spoke. "What happened in the great hall?" his daughter asked. "This is where they held their banquets, and where visiting knights paid homage to the king." Kate sighed. There was no evidence a king had ever been to Larocque. On the contrary, documents indicated that it had always been a private castle, built in the 11th century by someone named Armand de Clary, and later heavy rebuilt early in the 14th century, with another ring of outer walls and additional drawbridges. That added work was done by a knight named Francois Le Gros, or Francis the Fat, around 1302. Despite his name, Francois was an English knight, and he built Larocque in the New English style of castles, established by Edward I. The Edwardian castles were large, with spacious inner courtyards and pleasant quarters for the lord. This suited Francois, who was by all accounts had an artistic temperament, a lazy disposition, and a propensity for money troubles. Francois was forced to mortgage his castle and later to sell it outright. During the 100 Years' War, Larocque was controlled by a succession of knights, but the fortifications held. The castle was never captured in battle, only in commercial transactions. As for the Great Hall, she saw it was off to the left, badly ruined, but clearly indicating the outlines of a much larger room, almost 100 feet long. The monumental fireplace, 9 feet high and 12 feet wide, was still visible. Kate knew that any great hall of the size would have had stone walls and a timber roof, and yes, as she looked, she saw notches in the stone high up to hold the big horizontal timbers. Then there would have been cross bracing above that to support the roof. Okay. A British tour group squeezed past her on the narrow ramparts. She heard the guide say, "These ramparts were built by Sir Francis the Bad in 1363. Francis was a thoroughly nasty piece of work. He liked to torture men and women and even children in his vast dungeons. Now if you look to the left, you will see Lover's Leap, where Madame de Renaud fell to her death in 1292, disgraced because she was pregnant by her husband's stable boy. But it is disputed whether she fell or was pushed by her outraged spouse." Kate sighed. Where did they come up with this stuff? She turned to her sketchbook notes, where she was recording the outlines of the walls. This castle, too, had its secret passages, but Francis the Fat was a skilled architect. His passages were mostly for defense. One passage ran from the ramparts down behind the far wall of the great hall, past the rear of the fireplace. Another passage followed the battlements on the south ramparts. But the most important passage still eluded her. According to the 14th century writer Froissart, the castle of Larocque had never been taken by siege because its attackers could never find the secret passage that permitted food and water to be brought to the castle. It was rumored that this secret passage was linked to the network of caves in the limestone rock below the castle. Also that it ran some distance, ending in a concealed opening in the cliffs, somewhere. The easiest way to find it now would be to locate where it ended inside the castle and follow it back. But to find that opening, she would need technical help. Probably the next best thing would be ground radar. But to do that, she'd need the castle empty. It was closed on Mondays, then they might do it next Monday if... Her radio crackled. "Kate?" It was Merrick. She held the radio to her face. Press the button. "Yes, this is Kate. Come back to the farmhouse now. It's an emergency." And he clicked off. 9 feet underwater, Chris Hughes heard the gurgling hiss of his regulator as he adjusted the tether that held him in place against the current of the Dordogne. The water clarity was not bad today, about 12 feet, and he was able to see the entire large pylon of the fortified mill bridge at the water's edge. The pylon ended in a jumble of large cut rocks that ran in a straight line across the river. These rocks were the remains of the former bridge span. Chris moved along this line, examining the rocks slowly. He was looking for grooves or notches that would help him determine where timbers had been used. From time to time, he tried to turn one rock over, but it was very difficult underwater because he could get no leverage. On the surface above, he had a plastic float with a red striped diver's flag. It was there to protect him from the vacationing kayakers. At least, that was the idea. He felt a sudden jerk, yanking him away from the bottom. He broke surface and bumped his head against the yellow hull of a kayak. The rider was holding the plastic float, shouting at him in what sounded like German. Chris pulled his mouthpiece out and said, "Just leave that alone, will you?" He was answered in rapid German. The kayaker was pointing irritably toward the shore. "Listen, pal, I don't know that you're..." The man kept shouting and pointing toward the shore, his finger stabbing the air. Chris looked back. One of the students was standing on the shore, holding a radio in his hand. He was shouting. It took Chris a moment to understand. "Merrick wants you back to the farmhouse, now." "Jesus, how about in half an hour when I finish?" He says now. Dark clouds hung over the distant mesas, and it looked like there would be rain. In his office, Doniger hung up the phone and said, "They've agreed to come." "Good," Diane Kramer said. She was standing facing him, her back to the mountains. "We need their help." "Unfortunately," Doniger said, "we do." He got up from the desk and began to pace. He was always restless when he was thinking hard. "I just don't understand how we lost the professor in the first place," Kramer said. "He must have stepped into the world. You told him not to do it. You told him not to go in the first place, and he must have stepped into the world." "We don't know what happened," Doniger said. "We have no damn idea." "Except that he wrote a message," Kramer said. "Yes, according to Kastner. When did you talk to her?" "Late yesterday," Kramer said. "She called me as soon as she knew. She's been a very reliable connection for us, and she..." "Never mind," Doniger said, waving his hand irritably. "It's not core." That was the expression he always used when he thought something was irrelevant. Kramer said, "What's core?" "Getting him back," Doniger said. "It is essential that we get the man back. That is core." "No question," Kramer said. "Essential." "Personally, I thought that the old fart was an asshole," Doniger said. "But if we don't get him back, it's a publicity nightmare." "Yes, a nightmare. But I can deal with it," Doniger said. "You can deal with it, I'm sure." Over the years, Kramer had fallen into the habit of repeating whatever Doniger said when he was in one of his pacing moods. To an outsider, it looked like sycophancy, but Doniger found it useful. Frequently, when Doniger heard her say it back, he would disagree. Kramer understood that in this process, she was just a bystander. It might look like a conversation between two people, but it wasn't. Doniger was talking only to himself. "The problem," Doniger said, "is that we're increasing the number of outsiders who knew about the technology, but we're not getting a commensurate return. For all we know, those students won't be able to get him back either. Their chances are better. That's a presumption," he paced. "It's weak." "I agree, Bob. Weak." "And the search team you sent back? Who did you send?" "Gomez and Barreto. They didn't see the professor anywhere." "How long were they there?" "I believe about an hour." "They didn't step into the world?" Kramer shook his head. "Why take the risk? There's no point. They're a couple of ex-Marines, Bob. They wouldn't know where to look even if they did step in. They wouldn't even know what to be afraid of. It's completely different back there." "But these graduate students may know where to look." "That's the idea," Kramer said. Distant thunder rumbled. The first fat drops of rain streaked the office windows. Doniger stared at the rain. "What if we lose the graduate students, too? A publicity nightmare." "Maybe," Doniger said, "but we have to prepare for the possibility." The jet engines whined as the Gulfstream V rolled toward them. ITC in big silver letters on the tail. The stairs lowered, and a uniformed flight attendant rolled out a strip of red carpet at the bottom of the stairs. The graduate students stared. "No kidding," Chris Hughes said. "There really is a red carpet." "Let's go," Merrick said. He threw his backpack over his shoulder and led them aboard. Merrick had refused to answer their questions, pleading ignorance. He told them the results of the carbon dating. He told them he couldn't explain it. He told them that ITC wanted them to come help the professor, and that it was urgent. He didn't say any more, and he noticed that Stern, too, was keeping silent. Inside the plane was all gray and silver. The flight attendant asked them what they wanted to drink. All this luxury contrasted with a tough-looking man with cropped gray hair who came forward to greet them. Although the man wore a business suit, Merrick detected a military manner as he shook hands with each of them. "My name's Gordon," he said. "Vice President at ITC. Welcome aboard. Flying time to New Mexico is 9 hours, 40 minutes. Better fasten your seatbelts." They dropped into seats, feeling the aircraft begin to move on the runway. Moments later, the engines roared, and Merrick looked out the window to see the French countryside fall away beneath him. It could be worse, Gordon thought, sitting at the back of the plane and looking at the group. True, they were academics. They were a little befuddled, and there was no coordination, no team feeling among them. But on the other hand, they all seemed to be in decent physical condition, particularly the foreign guy, Merrick. He looked strong, and the woman wasn't bad either. Good muscle tone in the arms, calluses on her hands, competent manner, so she might hold up under pressure, he thought. But the good-looking kid would be useless, Gordon sighed as Chris Hughes looked out the window, caught his own reflection in the glass, and brushed back his hair with his hand. And Gordon couldn't decide about the fourth kid, the nerdy one. He'd obviously spent time outdoors. His clothes were faded and his glasses scratched, but Gordon recognized him as a tech guy. Knew everything about equipment and circuits, nothing about the world. It was hard to say how he'd react if things got tough. The big man, Merrick, said, "Are you going to tell us what's going on?" "I think you already know, Mr. Merrick," Gordon said. "Don't you?" "I think you already know. I have a piece of 600-year-old parchment with a professor's writing on it, in 600-year-old ink." "Yes, you do." Merrick shook his head, "But I have trouble believing it." "At this point," Gordon said, "it's simply a technological reality. It's real. It can be done." He got out of his seat and moved to sit with the group. "You mean time travel?" Merrick said. "No," Gordon said. "I don't mean time travel. Time travel is impossible. Everyone knows that. The very concept of time travel makes no sense, since time doesn't flow. The fact that we think time passes is just an accident of our nervous system, of the ways things look to us. In reality, time doesn't pass. We pass. Time itself is invariant. It just is. Therefore, past and future aren't separate locations, the way New York and Paris are separate locations. And since the past isn't a location, you can't travel to it." They were silent. They just stared at him. "It is important to be clear about this," Gordon said. "The ITC technology has nothing to do with time travel, at least not directly. What we have developed is a form of space travel. To be precise, we use quantum technology to manipulate an orthogonal multiverse coordinate change." They looked at him blankly. "It means," Gordon said, "that we travel to another place in the multiverse." "And what's the multiverse?" Kate said. "The multiverse is the world defined by quantum mechanics. It means that—" "Quantum mechanics?" Chris said. "What's quantum mechanics?" Gordon paused. "That's fairly difficult, but since you're historians," he said, "let me try to explain it historically. 100 years ago," Gordon said, physicists understood that energy, like light or magnetism or electricity, took the form of continuously flowing waves. We still refer to radio waves and light waves. In fact, the recognition that all forms of energy share this wave-like nature was one of the great achievements of 19th century physics. But there was a small problem, he said. It turned out if you shine light on a metal plate, you got an electric current. The physicist Max Planck studied the relationship between the amount of light shining on the plate and the amount of electricity produced, and he concluded that energy wasn't a continuous wave. Instead, energy seemed to be composed of individual units, which he called quanta. The discovery that energy came in quanta was the start of quantum physics, Gordon said. A few years later, Einstein showed that you could explain the photoelectric effect by assuming that light was composed of particles. A few years later, Einstein showed that you could explain the photoelectric effect by assuming that light was composed of particles, which he called photons. These photons of light struck the metal plate and knocked off electrons, producing electricity. Mathematically, the equations worked. They fit the view that the light consisted of particles. Okay so far? Yes. And pretty soon, physicists began to realize that not only light, but all energy was composed of particles. In fact, all matter in the universe took the form of particles. Atoms were composed of heavy particles in the nucleus, light electrons buzzing around on the outside. So, according to the new thinking, everything is particles, okay? Okay. The particles are discrete units, or quanta, and the theory that describes how these particles behave is quantum theory, a major discovery of 20th century physicists. Major discovery of 20th century physics. They were all nodding. Physicists continued to study these particles and begin to realize they're very strange entities. You can't be sure where they are, you can't measure them exactly, and you can't predict what they will do. Sometimes they behave like particles, sometimes like waves. Sometimes two particles will interact with each other even though they're a million miles apart, with no connection between them, and so on. The theory is starting to seem extremely weird. Now, two things happen to quantum theory. The first is that it gets confirmed over and over. It's the most proven theory in the history of science. Supermarket scanners, lasers, and computer chips all rely on quantum mechanics. So there's absolutely no doubt that quantum theory is the correct mathematical description of the universe. But the problem is, it's only a mathematical description. It's just a set of equations, and physicists couldn't visualize the world that was implied by those equations. It was too weird, too contradictory. Einstein, for one, didn't like that. He felt it meant the theory was flawed. But the theory kept getting confirmed, and the situation got worse and worse. Eventually, even scientists who won the Nobel Prize for contributions to quantum theory had to admit they didn't understand it. So, this made a very odd situation. For most of the 20th century, there's a theory of the universe that everyone uses, and everyone agrees is correct, but nobody can tell you what it is saying about the world. What does all of this have to do with the multiple universes? Merrick said. Look forward to chat with you guys soon. Hope you're enjoying so far. Voice mod available anytime. Exclamation champion for commands. I'm getting there, Gordon said. Many physicists tried to explain the equations, Gordon said. Each explanation failed for one reason or another. Then in 1957, a physicist named Hugh Everett proposed a daring new explanation. Everett claimed that our universe, the universe we see, the universe of rocks and trees and people and galaxies out in space, was just one of an infinite number of universes existing side by side. Each of these universes was constantly splitting. So there was a universe where Hitler lost the war and another where he won, a universe where Kennedy died and another where he lived. And also a world where you brushed your teeth in the morning and one where you didn't, and so forth, and on and on and on. An infinity of worlds. Everett called this the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. His explanation was consistent with the quantum equations, but physicists found it very hard to accept. They didn't like the idea of all these worlds constantly spitting all the time. They found it unbelievable that reality could take this form. Most physicists still refuse to accept it, Gordon said, even though no one has ever shown it is wrong. Everett himself had no patience with his colleagues' objections. He insisted that the theory was true whether you liked it or not. If you disbelieved his theory, you were just being stodgy and old-fashioned, exactly like the scientists who disbelieved the Copernican theory that placed the sun at the center of the solar system, and which also had seemed unbelievable at the time. Because Everett claimed that many worlds concept was actually true, there really were multiple universes, and they were running right alongside our own. All these multiple universes were eventually referred to as a multiverse. Wait a minute, Chris said. Are you telling us this is true? Yes, Gordon said. It's true. How do you know? Merrick said. I'll show you, Gordon said, and he reached for a manila file that said ITC CTC technology. He took out a blank piece of paper and began drawing. Very simple experiment. It's been done for 200 years. Set up two walls, one in front of the other. The first wall has a single vertical slit in it. He showed them the drawing. Now you shine a light on the slit. On the wall behind, you'll see a white line, Merrick said, from the light coming through the slit. Correct. It would look something like this. Gordon pulled out a photo on a card. Gordon continued to sketch. Now instead of one slit, you have a wall with two vertical slits in it. Shine a light on it, and on the wall behind you see two vertical lines, Merrick said. No, you'll see a series of light and dark bars, he showed them. And, Gordon continued, if you shine your light through your four slits, you get half as many bars as before, because every other bar goes black. Merrick frowned. More slits means fewer bars? Why? The usual explanation is what I've drawn. The light passing through the slits acts like two waves that overlap. In some places they add to each other, and in other places they cancel each other out. And that makes a pattern of alternating light and dark on the wall. We say the waves interfere with each other, and that is an interference pattern. Chris Hughes said, so, what's wrong with all that? What's wrong, Gordon said, is that I just gave you a 19th century explanation. It was perfectly acceptable when everybody believed that light was a wave. But since Einstein, we know that light consists of particles called photons. How do you explain a bunch of photons making this pattern? There was silence. They were shaking their heads. David Stern spoke for the first time. Particles aren't as simple as the way you have described them. Particles have some wave-like properties, depending on the situation. Particles can interfere with one another. In this case, the photons and the beam of light are interfering with one another to produce the same pattern. Well, that does seem logical, Gordon said. After all, a beam of light is zillions and zillions of little photons. It's not hard to imagine that they would interact with one another in some fashion, and produce the interference pattern. They were all nodding. Yes, not hard to imagine. We must expand our horizons, our imaginations, for all of such great stuff. But is it really true? Gordon said. Is that what's going on? One way to find out is to eliminate any interaction among the photons. Let's just deal with one photon at a time. This has been done experimentally. You make a beam of light so weak that only one photon comes out at a time, and you can put very sensitive detectors behind the slits. So sensitive that they can register a single photon hitting them, okay? They nodded, more slowly this time. Now, there can't be any interference from other photons, because we are dealing with a single photon only. So the photons come through, one at a time. The detectors record where the photons land, and after a few hours, we get a result, something like this. What we see, Gordon said, is that the individual photons land only in certain places, and never others. They behave exactly the same as they do in a regular beam of light, but they are coming in one at a time. There are no other photons to interfere with them, yet something is interfering with them, because they are making the usual interference pattern. So, what is interfering with a single photon? Silence. Mr. Stern? Stern shook his head. If you calculate the possibilities, let's not escape into mathematics. Let's stay with reality. After all, this experiment has been performed, with real photons striking real detectors, and something real interferes with them. The question is, what is it? It has to be other photons, Stern said. Yes, Gordon said, but where are they? We have detectors, and we don't detect any other photons, so where are the interfering photons? Stern sighed. Okay, he said. He threw up his hands. Chris said, What do you mean, okay? Okay, what? Gordon nodded to Stern. Tell them. What he is saying is that single photon interference proves that reality is much greater than just what we see in our universe. The interference is happening, but we can't see any cause for it in our universe. Therefore, the interfering photons must be in other universes, and that provides that the other universes exist. Correct, Gordon said, and they sometimes interact with our own universe. I'm sorry, Merrick said. What? Would you do that again? Why is some other universe interfering with our universe? It's that nature of the multiverse. It's the nature of the multiverse, Gordon said. Remember, within the multiverse, the universes are constantly splitting, which means that many other universes are very similar to ours, and it is the similar ones that interact. Each time we make a beam of light in our universe, beams of light are simultaneously made in many similar universes, and the photons from those other universes interfere with the photons in our universe and produce the patterns that we see. And you're telling us this is true? Absolutely true. The experiment has been done many times. Merrick frowned. Kate stared at the table. Chris scratched his head. Finally, David Stern said, Not all the universes are similar to ours? No. Are they similar? They all simultaneous to ours? Not at all, no. Therefore, some universes exist at an earlier time? Yes, actually, since they are infinite in number, the universes exist at all earlier times. Stern thought for a moment. And you are telling us that ITC has the technology to travel to these other universes? Yes, Gordon said. That's what I'm telling you. How? We make wormhole connections in quantum foam. You mean Wheeler foam? Subatomic fluctuations of space-time? Alright, and in about 20 minutes, we get to Warren Howe and Hunt later this evening. That'll be just fine. Yes, but that's impossible. Gordon smiled. You'll see for yourself soon enough. We will? What do you mean? Merrick said. I thought you understood, Gordon said. Professor Johnson is in the 14th century. We want you to go back there to get him out. No one spoke. The flight attendant pushed a button and all the windows in the cabin slid closed at the same time, blocking out the sunshine. She went around the cabin, putting sheets and blankets on the couches, making them up as beds. Besides each, she placed large padded headphones. Place large padded headphones. We're going back, Chris Hughes said. How? It will be easier just to show you, Gordon said. He handed them each a small cellophane packet of pills. Right now, I want you to take these. What are they? Chris said. 3 kinds of sedative, he said. Then I want you to all lie down and listen on the headphones. Sleep if you like. The flight's only 10 hours, so you won't absorb very much. Anyway, but at least you'll get used to the language and pronunciation. What language? Chris said, taking his pills. Old English and Middle French. Merrick said, I already know these languages. I doubt you know correct pronunciation. Wear the headphones. But nobody knows the correct pronunciation, Merrick said. As soon as he said it, he caught himself. I think you will find, Gordon said, that we know. Chris lay down on one bed. He pulled up the blanket and slipped the headphones over his ears. At least they blotted out the sound of the jet. These pills must be strong, he thought, because he suddenly felt very relaxed. He couldn't keep his eyes open. He listened as a tape began to play. A voice said, Take a deep breath. Imagine you are in a beautiful warm garden. Everything is familiar and comforting to you. Directly ahead, you see a door going down to the basement. You open the door. You know the basement well because it is your basement. You begin to walk down the stone steps into the warm and comforting basement. With each step you hear voices. You find them pleasant to listen to, easy to listen to. Then male and female voices began to alternate. Give my hat, yif may min hat. Here is your hat, herby thine hat. Thank you, gra mercy. You are welcome, I pray thee. The sentences became longer. Soon Chris found it difficult to follow them. I am cold, I would rather have a coat. I am chilling cold, I would rather have a coat. Chris was drifting gently, imperceptibly, into sleep, with a sensation that he was still walking down a flight of stairs, deeper and deeper into cavernous, echoing, comforting place. He was peaceful, though the last 2 sentences he remembered gave a tinge of concern. Prepare to fight. Dich thisvli to fetched. Where is my sword? Where beach me sword? But then he exhaled and slept. Black Rock. Risk everything or gain nothing. Geoffrey de Charny, 1358. The night was cold and the sky filled with stars as they stepped off into the airplane onto the wet runway. So this will be chapter 5 now. He just finished chapter 4. We are getting started with chapter 5. To the east, Merrick saw the dark outlines of mesas beneath low-hanging clouds. A land cruiser was waiting off to one side. Yep, officially this is the start of chapter 5. It actually made it easier to recognize it this time because it has the little title there. It's just sometimes not very well defined. So this is officially the start of chapter 5. I'm going to be heading out about 20 minutes from now, so let's go ahead and keep reading for now. We'll get to Mordhau, first game of this adventure tonight when we come back, and then we'll get to some good hunts. We'll see what anything else after that for the rest of good Medieval Fantasy Thursday, Love and Thunder Thursday. No chatters yet so far, but we'll have some good hope anytime and for tonight as well. So we shall see. Soon they were driving down a highway, dense forests on both sides of the roads. Where exactly are we? Merrick said. Land Cruiser. Here we go. About an hour north of Albuquerque, Gordon said. The nearest town is Black Rock. That's where our research facility is. Looks like the middle of nowhere, Merrick said. Only at night, actually. There are 15 high-tech research companies in Black Rock. And of course, Sandia is just down the road. Los Alamos is about just an hour away. Farther away, White Sands, all that. They continued down the road for several more miles. They came to a prominent green and white highway sign that read ITC Black Rock Laboratory. The Land Cruiser turned right, heading up a twisting road into the forested hills. From the back seat, Stern said, "You told us before that you can connect to other universes." Sorry, I get some weird messages and such. Looks like the middle of nowhere, Merrick said. Only at night. Actually, there are 15 high-tech research companies in Black Rock. And of course, Sandia is just down the road. Los Alamos is about an hour away. Farther away, White Sands, all that. They continued down the road for several more miles. They came to a prominent green and white highway sign that read, ITC Black Rock Laboratory. The Land Cruiser turned right, heading up a twisting road into the forested hills. From the back seat, Stern said, "You told us before that you can connect to other universes." "Yes, through quantum foam. That's right. But that doesn't make any sense," Stern said. "Why? What is quantum foam?" Kate said, stifling a yawn. "It's a remnant of the birth of the universe," Stern said. He explained that the universe had begun as a single, very dense pinpoint of matter. Then, 18 billion years ago, it exploded outward from that pinpoint, in what was known as the Big Bang. After the explosion, the universe expanded as a sphere, except it wasn't an absolutely perfect sphere. Inside the sphere, the universe wasn't absolutely homogeneous, which is why we now have galaxies clumped and clustered irregularly in the universe, instead of being uniformly distributed. Anyway, the point is, the expanding sphere had tiny, tiny imperfections in it, and the imperfections never got ironed out. They're still a part of the universe. They are? Where? At some atomic dimensions, quantum foam is just a way of saying that at very small dimensions, space-time has ripples and bubbles, but the foam is smaller than an individual atomic particle. There may or may not be wormholes in that foam. There are, Gordon said. But how could you use them for travel? You can't put a person through a hole that small. You can't put anything through it. Correct, Gordon said. You also can't put a piece of paper through a telephone line, but you can send a fax. Stern frowned. That's entirely different. Why? Gordon said. You can transmit anything as long as you have a way to compress and encode it, isn't that so? In theory, yes, Stern said. But you're talking about compressing and encoding the information for an entire human being. That's right. That can't be done. Gordon was smiling, amused now. Why not? Because the complete description of a human being all the billions of cells, how they are interconnected, all the chemicals and molecules they contain. Their biochemical state consists of far too much information for any computer to handle. It's just information, Gordon said, shrugging. Yes, too much information. We compress it by using a lossless fractal algorithm. Even so, it's still an enormous... Excuse me, Chris said. Are you saying you compress a person? No, we compress the information equivalent of a person. And how is that done? Chris said. With compression algorithms, methods to pack data on a computer, so they take up less space, like JPEG and MPEG for visual material. Are you familiar with those? I've got software that uses it, but that's it. Okay, Gordon said. All compression programs work the same way. They look for similarities in data. Suppose you have a picture of a rose made up of 1 million pixels. Each pixel has a location and a color. That's 3 million pieces of information. A lot of data. But most of those pixels are going to be red, surrounded by other red pixels. So the program scans the picture line by line and sees whether adjacent pixels are the same color. If they are, it writes an instruction up to the computer that says, make this pixel red, and also the next 50 pixels in the line. Then switch to gray and make the next 10 pixels gray, and so on. It doesn't store information for each individual point. It stores instructions for how to recreate the picture, and the data is cut to 1/10 of what it was. Even so, Stern said, you're not talking about a 2-dimensional picture, you're talking about a 3-dimensional living object, and its description requires so much data that you'd need a massive parallel processing, Gordon said, nodding. That's true. Chris frowned. Parallel processing is what? You hook several computers together and divide the job up among them, so it gets done faster. A big parallel processing computer would have 16,000 processors hooked together. For a really big one, 32,000 processors. We have 32 billion processors hooked together. Billion, Chris said. Stern leaned forward. That's impossible, even if you tried to make one. He stared at the roof of the car, calculating. Say allow 1 inch between motherboards. That makes a stack, 2,600. That makes a stack half a mile high. Even reconfigured into a cube, it'd be a huge building. You'd never build it, you'd never cool it, and it'd never work anyway, because the processors would end up too far apart. Gordon sat and smiled. He was looking at Stern, waiting. The only possible way to do that much processing, Stern said, would be to use the quantum characteristics of individual electrons. But then you'd be talking about a quantum computer, and no one's ever made one. Gordon just smiled. Have they? Stern said. Let me explain. What David is talking about, Gordon said to the others. Ordinary computers make calculations using 2 electron states, which are designated 1 and 0. That's how all computers work, by pushing around 1s and 0s. But 20 years ago, Richard Feynman suggested it might be possible to make an extremely powerful computer using all 32 quantum states of an electron. Many laboratories are now trying to build these quantum computers. Their advantage is unimaginably great power, so great that you can indeed describe and compress a 3-dimensional living object into an electron stream, exactly like a fax. You can then transmit the electron stream through a quantum foam wormhole and reconstruct it in another universe. And that's what we do. It's not quantum teleportation. It's not particle entanglement. It's direct transmission to another universe. Alright, we'll pick it up right from there soon. I'm going to be heading out for a little bit. We'll pick it up here very soon, shortly. And we will enjoy that. Alright, good start to timeline then. We had about a good hour here, so finish up chapter 4 on to chapter 5. Just got to get ready here and come on back with some Mordhau before we get some good hunt and other fun tonight. So that will be just fine. Gonna be fantastic. I will see you guys then. Look forward to chatting with you and a fun time soon to come. If you didn't make it in chat quite yet, that's right. We'll have plenty of time tonight for everyone to chat, and we'll pick it up here very soon. So until then, guys, I have the new goodbye for you. Here it is. See you in a bit, guys. We will be back. Gonna be great. I'm gonna get ready and come back here shortly. See you for some great times. An excellent time. Definitely one of the best Twitch streams on Twitch TV. Comparison is the thief of joy. We will keep it up. Create the great adventures. Now that everything will work out in the time and place. Get our good audience when it is needed to be. So look forward to that. Great times this month. Catch you soon.